most powerful chemical reactions in our body. The most powerful. So these hormones are very, very important to us, and it's never just hormones. And also another, I think, very interesting fact, hysterectomy comes from the word hysteria. And you know, the Greek origin of the word hysteria is womb. So, you know, as long ago as 1739, if we go back to the history books, they talk about, for example, the menopause and our periods in 1739. And interestingly, they were saying that we, as women, become unhinged. This is actually in the history books. And what they thought was going to be helpful, and they did, was some bloodletting, whether it was under our breasts or whether it was in our legs, and then we became much more cognizant. So the beauty of what is happening today, because of this, you know, as an example with these talks, we're bringing things out into the open. So we're not hiding behind it, and we'll actually have lots more evidence now, and it's not mythical or other aspects. So today we're going to be exploring our hormones and how it impacts our work and our mental health. And when I say work, most people know me, I'm talking about paid work and work at home. Because even yesterday I spoke to a mummy, she said, oh, you know, when I go to work, and it's like, you know, we have to make a very clear distinction. Being at home, we are working incredibly hard, so it's just that we're not getting paid for it. So now I'd like to introduce you to Ashleigh. So Ashleigh Lloyd, and we met about 6 months ago, I think, was it? About 6 months ago. And honestly, her transition of bringing Baby Expo, and that's just one part of it. But there is so much before it. So if you'd like to give a little introduction around Baby Expo.
Yes, so Baby Expo launched at our Retreat Centre last weekend. It's been over a year in the making. The idea behind that was to always provide a one-stop shop for parents who are just about to have their first baby, or about to have another baby, planning for a baby, or have children of their own. Bringing all the campus brands together, whether they're already here or bringing brands from internationally as well, but also by providing education for parents as well. It can sometimes be so overwhelming as a new parent, or welcoming your second baby or your third baby. You face so many different challenges, no two children are the same, so it can be very overwhelming and challenging at times, but also amazing too. So yeah, we want to provide the very best education for parents, let parents connect with experts, let them connect with other parents as well, and almost create one big community here in Dubai. Whether you're from a brand perspective or you're from a parent perspective, just bringing everyone together really.
Thank you, and honestly, it was an exceptional event. What was so powerful that everyone took away from it, whether it was the people who were working in the environment of the Expo or the parents that were coming, it was such a positive environment, and it wasn't hard sell. Nobody was about hard sell. It was a really, just a wonderful place to be. So thank you for providing that. So my main question is, now that you have two daughters, two small daughters, oh sorry, sorry.
Well, everyone thinks it's okay.
It is beautiful, honestly. It is beautiful.
They're very alike. They look like twins, so yeah.
And their ages are very close together. Yeah. So, you know, on your journey of from maybe starting with puberty and having to study and having to overcome different things and in the workplace, do you feel it played a part in a good way or a not so good way in terms of the impact of your hormones?
Yeah, I think For me personally, I had really irregular days as a teenager, was going for loads of tests and never actually got to the bottom of it until I had my first little girl, and I was diagnosed with underactive thyroid. And that has been the reason for so many issues, also hormonal issues as well. So that was almost a bit of a relief to finally have an answer to that, because it caused so many stress. Why were my periods not regular? Was there something wrong? Was there something I should be worried about? Was going for scans? And it almost just seemed like no one could really help me or give me an answer. And I think as a young girl, not being married and thinking about how I would like to have a family at one point in time, that was quite a stressful period of my life. And then when I did get married, I was almost worrying, would I be able to have children? Was that going to impact my relationship? Impact everything really, if that was going to be a stress for me. So yeah, I think when I had my little girl, to finally get diagnosed with that and be put on treatment, which is I'll be on for the rest of my life, but it's made such a positive impact on me personally.
And that's the whole point of having this discussion, is to raise awareness, because like you said, you were diagnosed with low thyroid levels. Now, she's a journalist and an author, wears many hats, Brian, and she's written a book called Mad Women. And from the age of 11, she had OCD. And throughout her childhood and adulthood, she has had very dark moments, very, very ill. And it wasn't until she had her first child that exactly that they discovered that she had low progesterone levels. And she talks about when she was given the progesterone, she talks about it in terms of Disney, you know, where the birds are singing, and she said from taking that tablet, within 5 to 6 hours, the fog had cleared and her world had changed forever. And yet, from 11 years of age with OCD, also her OCD has improved dramatically. Now, it's not just about the hormones, but it was so significant, and she is very angry, and that's the title of the book, Mad. She's so angry because all of those years have been lost, which will never get back. So these are situations which, again, is all about raising awareness. Who would have thought that her OCD was as a result of her very, very low progesterone? So it's not just low, it was very low. But again, I do believe that thankfully the world is changing. You know, I've got 3 adult listeners, and I think it's a better place for them now, thankfully.
Yeah, I think there's so much more access, and I think things like this, raising awareness, social media can obviously be a negative or a positive, but people are so much more open about speaking about challenges that they're facing personally, sharing their journeys, which I think can be such a positive, because you can feel really scared, you can feel really anxious, you can feel really worried, you don't really know where to turn. So I think if you can stumble across someone who's facing a similar problem, a similar issue, it can almost be a bit of a safe haven to turn to and see the steps that they've taken to get some help. So I think things have definitely improved, and I think for me, having a little girl, she's 3, I really want things to keep progressing the way they are, and for whatever challenges or anything that she comes across, there is help and support there for her, and she feels able to open up.
But I also think for real changes to happen, we've got to get the men on board as well. And you know, with your son, it's very much about having an open dialogue with him about this is what happens. Because these hormonal changes that we go through, they have such a huge impact on our brain in so many different ways. And, you know, as you said, it's just the hormones, and it's so much more. So we have a responsibility of care and duty of care ourselves to have that understanding and communicate that to our children. So now in the workplace, and I mean, it must have been really stressful with Baby Expo at times. And honestly, you rode that storm so incredibly well. You know, when you see her walking around, and whether you are like a swan and you have this air of calm and it's like you are really happy, but certainly that must have taken a toll, just on your mental health as well. So how do you cope in situations like that? What's your strategy?
I don't really know, to be honest. I think some days were super stressful. I think having 2 young children, being away from family, just kind of having my husband here. Some days that when I was back in the UK, I had my mum and dad around the corner. That seemed so much easier because at the drop of a hat, I could phone my mum, she would be there. So yeah, I think my husband is actually probably my biggest support, and he really helps, split the stress with me. If there's things with the children, or we just really try to kind of juggle everything together and support each other as much as we can. We try at the start of the week, things can change so quickly. Let's sit down and discuss what our week's looking like, where we need to be, and then figure out what's the best plan for the children, how we fit everything in, how we make sure they get to their clubs, they do everything, but also if one of us has a more stressful day than the other, how the other person can help them. So yeah, I think, we always say that we're a really good team, and I genuinely do believe that, and I think, he's definitely my best friend, and we just try, he really helps me through a lot.
So again, what is very much talked about here is communication. And I think when there is a breakdown in so many of our relationships, be it with our children, be it with our husbands, partners, it really is miscommunication. But sometimes having the bandwidth. And there's times where it's really wonderful not to have to ask or speak. That makes a big difference, and I do feel as women, we can be more intuitive there. But honestly, again, when we were recording the interview with the podcast, and Ashleigh's little girl was crying a little bit and wanted, Daddy just scooped her up in a very playful way, so intuitively. And that was really good to see. It is about teamwork.
Yeah, for sure. I think when we first got together, we weren't really good at communicating together, and I think that's something that we've really worked on. And I think having 2 children, being away from family, it's so important that you can communicate and that you just try and talk through everything. You're very open and honest. So yeah, I mean, nothing's ever perfect, nothing's ever easy, but we do try as much as possible to communicate as much as we possibly can and talk through everything and always have a plan ahead. I think for both of us, the children are always at the forefront of our priorities. So yeah, I think when we've got that, communication is definitely key.
So going back to the workplace and the team that you've built, I assume it's a very high number of females, and do you have to navigate different issues around, because obviously the hormones do play a big impact in our mood, whether it's high or low, and even our cognitive function. Know that right before our period, physiologically, we do have greater cognition. Do you find it plays a role in a workplace or not?
Actually, our team is quite male dominated. Well, not so much now, but at the start it was myself and 2 co-founders, and who were both males. So now we're expanding our team, taking on more females. But I think it's, as a female, I think we're just very sensitive to, there's going to be days or there's going to be weeks that you're maybe just not feeling your best, or things get on top of you very quickly, and I think, I think being a small team, I think we know each other really well, and we're kind of aware of, if someone's maybe not having the best day, just kind of back off a bit, pick it up again tomorrow. So I would say that's probably the strategy. But I think as we do grow our team now post first event, I think that will probably become much more apparent, and I'm sure many more females will be joining the team.
So of course I'm all about sleep, and we know that sleep has such a huge impact on how we perform, particularly on our mental health. And we know that there is not one element of our being that is not impacted by our sleep. So would you like to say how well you sleep?
Yeah, I remember speaking to you on Saturday and saying that I was really looking forward to catching up on sleep post baby Expo. Had a very late night with everything wrapping up on Saturday, and then my children were both up just before 6, so I was like, yeah, no rest for the wicked there. I tried to get as much sleep as possible. Thankfully, both my children are really great sleepers, so that definitely helps. But I think in the lead up to obviously the event, there's so much going on. You get to bed, and remember speaking to Melissa about this, and it being like 12 o'clock, 1 a.m, and something springs to your mind, and you're like, oh, I better make a note on my phone, I better make a reminder. So yeah, I think sometimes when you're working during the day, you're so much focused on what you need to get through, what you need to do. Then you come home and your focus shifts to your children. You want to spend some time with them, you want to play with them, you've got dinner, you've got bath. I always try and phone my parents back in the UK with them every day as well. And then they go to bed and you're kind of like dinner, catching up on stuff from work. So it's almost like the night time kind of goes so quickly that before you know it, it's late. You're like, oh, I don't have a lot of time for sleep now.
I mean, that you just given a perfect example of what it's like to be a mother. There are a mother, a daughter, a wife. There are so many facets to our day, and we just all get on with it. And I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is trying, and I'm very far away from it, but trying to be compassionate about, I've not achieved quite so much as I wanted to today. I've not, because I think for young mothers now, I honestly believe there are so many more pressures on you. The world is so fast, and it is giving yourself permission to say, actually, I'm really tired. I didn't achieve that today, but tomorrow's another day. And it's finding that element of compassion for yourself, and then you'll be able to pass that on to your daughter as well. I know Kieran, my husband, he says that he would always choose to employ a mother simply because our ability to multitask and our time management is like nothing that he's ever experienced. So I think I'd like to say a huge thank you. And I've got one last question, and that last question is, to your former self, to your childlike self, now that you sit here, what would you like to say to your childlike self?
I'd probably say don't put as much pressure on yourself. I think, as you said, life's moving so quickly just now. There's social media, there's so many comparisons. I think you come out of school, you go to university, because that's kind of what the norm is. You finish university, you get a job, and then you kind of want to work through your career. There's a pressure on, have you met someone, are you getting married, are you having children? So I think it's almost just try and be kinder on yourself. There's no norm, whatever stage in life you choose to do something, however you want to approach your career, if you want to have a family, I think it's, you're your own destiny. So yeah, just be kinder on yourself and take the foot off the gas limit.
Thank you. Does anybody have a question for Ashleigh before we finish? More still?
The one thing that we as women hate is when like men in China blame everything on hormones. Oh, it's your hormone. No, it's not hormones. It's you who's not doing your job. So I think okay, we can use it as an excuse. And I think we have to change this mindset of hormones. It's like you men, you also have hormones. Like it's your testosterone.
I think that was such a valid point in that how do we, and that's exactly why I was saying, none of this is going to change until we get the men on board, none of it. So it comes down to education, and we need to get in there as young as possible. But we also, as women, as mothers, have to educate our boys around all aspects of what it's like to be a woman, so that they can be as compassionate and understand that, like I said, throughout history, it's like, yeah, hormones, just. And we have to change that narrative. That's ultimately what we have to do. So that's our goal now, is to change the narrative. That's what we have to do. So I would like to introduce my next guest, Carina Harvey.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for having me here as well today. So I'm a personal identity coach. So basically what that means is I work with individuals who've either gone through some kind of significant change or they are about to go through some kind of change, which really calls your identity into question. So it really kind of makes you feel like you've lost touch with yourself. And it's been kind of a work in progress in terms of how I kind of uncovered that's what I wanted to do as a coach. So I come from a corporate background originally, and I've been a coach for a very long time throughout my corporate career, and I always knew that I wanted to set up something from my own, basically, in terms of coaching. So I kind of went down this period of rediscovery, like self-discovering myself, which, looking back, I probably hadn't realised that's what I was doing. And so it all really started from when I moved to Dubai, which was about 9 years ago now. And I'd actually already gone through a number of quite significant changes through my life, but just before I moved, I was about to go through a divorce. I'd separated from my then husband. I'd been through quite a major redundancy as well, and I decided that all of the stars were aligning, so why not change something else? So I picked everything up and threw it in the air and thought, you know what, I'm going to come to Dubai. But for me, that was a real kind of turning point, because I realised that I hadn't dealt with a lot of the emotions that came up from all of those changes, and actually, if I think about it, I hadn't dealt with most of the emotions that had come through from all of the changes that I'd experienced in life. And I think every single time something had changed for me, my identity had changed as well. And so I was kind of picking up the pieces, as many of us do. We kind of go through this process of thinking, wow, we just got to pick ourselves up and get on with it, right? But in actual fact, it's good to go through that period of introspection and think about what's changed, and actually think about the good that has brought, the level of growth that has brought to you. So I went through this period of kind of rediscovery, and I did lots of coaching training to solidify my actual coaching experience. And one of the things that I looked at was life purpose. And so I actually retrained to become a stylist, because I'm kind of into fashion, and I've always been into fashion. And I thought, you know what, maybe it's something that I haven't explored before, and I really need to look at a little bit further. And so it was through my experience of then working as a stylist that I realised that all of my clients that I was working with had kind of gone through some change, whether they were going for a promotion, or they were, they're new to motherhood, or they were going through a relationship breakup. And everybody was looking to answer the same kind of question, like, who am I now? And I thought, there's something more to this around the identity piece. And so that's how I started to develop the identity coaching. So really the whole purpose is to work with people to help them to understand who they've become, who they've grown to be through that level of change, and to see that this is actually a good thing. Because I think when you become confident in yourself and you know exactly who you are, then you start to make the right decisions for yourself, and you start to ask of life what it is that you really want. So that was a really long-winded explanation.
No, but there's so many things that struck me whilst you were talking, in that really you went through
many life-changing events, all at once. And yet, again, the resilience is there. Where does that come from in terms of resilience? And also, I know that one of the aspects of your practice is about exploring our personal values. Now, can you just expand a little bit on what that means within your workplace about exploring values?
Yeah. So there's two things that I try to concentrate on, which is the values piece and the beliefs as well, because these two things are really the things that drive our thought process, and therefore that drives our actions and our behaviours. So everything we do in terms of how we act, how we behave, is triggered by a thought, but that's triggered by our underlying sense of values as well. So it's really important to understand your values, because these are the things that are going to, and by the way, they change all of the time as well. So this is the other thing. I think people underestimate the fact that your values can change throughout your life, because obviously your life changes. Your values are not going to be the same when you're 40 years old as when you were 20 years old, for example. So it's really important to have that kind of check-in process around your values, to really understand what it is that's important to you, what you prioritise, and that will help you to be able to set your goals, your objectives, think about what it is that you want in life. But also, quite importantly, and some people don't always think of this as well, is that your values help to drive your non-negotiables as well, and they actually help you to set in place your boundaries. So it's really important to look at these.
Can you give an example of what would be a non-negotiable? What would be a value there? Can you give an example?
Yes, I think so. A lot of the talks that I've been doing recently are around mums returning to work, and I think, thank goodness, the topic is really.
Excuse me. Paid work. Mums returning to
Paid work. Yes, sorry.
We have to change this narrative.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You really are. But yeah, so a lot of the events that I've been at recently are talking about mums returning to paid work. And the things that I always talk about is understanding your values and understanding your non-negotiables. So, if you are looking for a job that's going to give you a certain level of flexibility, because that's driven around your needs to be at home with your family, that's a non-negotiable for you. So it's important to be aware of that value, but then it's important to understand how do you live and act and behave by that value as well. So that could be an
that's
example.
a really nice example. So you also talked about our belief system. Now, how can we change? Are we meant to change our belief system, or how would we navigate that?
Yeah, so I think with regards to beliefs, so beliefs can be quite a tricky thing, because sometimes it's really hard to understand where our beliefs come from, and it can be as simple as something has been said, or there's a small, tiny event that's happened in our lives, and actually that sets us up with a belief, either about ourselves or about our circumstances. So it depends on the belief and how it's serving you. So there's a thing called limiting beliefs, which I know a lot of people have heard of. If it's a positive belief and it's serving you well, then that's great, then obviously we don't need to change that. But it's important to look at the beliefs that are not serving us, and sometimes that can be really hard to do, because it requires that level of introspection, and sometimes we don't want to go there as well, because we will tell ourselves the same narratives in order to protect ourselves as well. If there's something that we're scared of, then we're actually continually feeding ourselves that sometimes, because we want to protect ourselves. But if we uncover that, then we might find that there's no need to believe that, and it can be quite a releasing feeling, I guess, to do that.
You're quite empowering, and if we think about a lot of your work, it is about empowering. And again, we all talk about social media and the impact that has, and generally, it can be quite negative, because it's almost like setting up this perfection, and we're striving for something that is just too hard to achieve. But I also think that social media can have a positive effect as well, in that we can look to see what we can achieve. So within your everyday practice, where do you find one of the biggest issues with the clients that you're working with within the workplace?
one of the biggest issues. I think one of the biggest issues is usually around having that self-belief. And I think, I feel like that's a really common issue. I mean, there's so many different common issues. I'm just trying to think what would be a really prominent one, and also links to social media as well, I guess. But yeah, having that self-belief, and I think that's probably where sometimes social media can play either a really positive role or a really negative role. Because we don't have that strength of our self-belief, then we can allow social media to kind of govern our thought process. And so again, it's being able to look at that thought process and rationalise it as well.
Thank you, that was very insightful. But also, if we're looking at within the workplace and women and their hormones and their mental health, do you find that is a roadblock to a woman, that imposter syndrome being part of who she is and being that roadblock to succeed? And if so, how do you help her with that?
Yeah, I think imposter syndrome is such a big one as well. And I mean, I've suffered with imposter syndrome, and I think in some ways I always will, because it's about acknowledging these things and learning to kind of work through them, and it's always going to be an ongoing piece of work, but it's important to understand, it's knowing when that comes up for you, because I think sometimes we can go into situations and we just accept that we will have imposter syndrome and we don't really acknowledge it. So if we understand when it's coming up, how it's coming up, and thinking about why it's coming up for us, and again it comes back to rationalising that thought process, and if we can understand, the best thing is if we can understand what's triggered that for us as well, because then we can really start to almost debate with that event and think, well, hang on a second, it's come to this belief, but why has that been the case? Is that actually fact? If it's not, then we can start to disprove that, but it will always be a bit of a battle as well.
So, as a mother of 3 daughters, I am, always looking and wanting to move on in terms of the future. But I was at a Female Fusion event about a year ago, maybe less now. But it was a mixed event, and I arrived there, having gone to Female Fusion events for the last 6 years, and they've always been just females. And I go there, and there's men there. It's in the evening. It's like, this is weird. I didn't know there's men. Anyway, within Female Fusion, they have a 1-minute elevator pitch. So the women go in. Go up, including myself, and say what your business was. And there were some of the most incredible women that stood up and was explaining about their business, and they achieved so much. But they go in, and anyway, the men came to do the elevator pitch, and the man came and said, "I'm the best. Nobody." And it really struck me, where does that come from? We need, as women, we need some of that, because genuinely, the women that have gone before him, explaining what they had achieved and what their business was. But so where can we help our women with this identity?
Yeah, I think obviously that's something that's historic, right? And so, we look to our mothers, we look to our grandmothers, and we think about the struggles that they've actually faced and then how they've responded to that. And gradually, as per generation has gone on, we've grown stronger and stronger as women, but it's not going to disappear. And I think the thing that we can try to do now is actually with our children, like what you were saying earlier, is how can we make our little girls stronger, and how can we help our boys to understand that, this is the kind of the world we live in, and there has to be that level of equality. So I think the focus is on our children. I think that's good.
And, when we're talking about this, it's still celebrating the fact that we are women, because there is so much to celebrate, and maintain and retain our femininity. And I know, like with my 3 daughters, when they say things of how proud they are of me, there is nothing, the sense of being in me when my 3 daughters, say, "Gosh, Mummy, I am so proud of you, look what Mummy's doing." So again, we as mothers mustn't be frightened to go out and be who we want to be, Because when we do that, we become much better within ourselves. And looking at your role in terms of helping our mothers, and not, mothers to be and women generally, what would be one of the most important aspects of helping a person find their identity?
I think, so it comes back to when you know your identity and you start to work through, your values, you understand your values, you understand why certain things are important to you. I think then automatically the things start to slot into place. But then, as I said before, we carry these beliefs around with us as well, so it's definitely an area that we also need to work on in conjunction with that. And then it really is about building that level of confidence of your identity. Because when you have that level of confidence, you have that certainty, you go out to the world and you think, well, hang on a second, I'm not happy with that situation, and I'm happy to stand up and say that as well. And it really does become something that you suddenly start to find your voice, and you start to act much more empowered, just having that level of certainty.
And I think this is what's going to be very positive now in terms of our parenting. There was a very interesting study many years ago, and I'm sure all of you are quite familiar with it, the marshmallow experiment, and it was in the 1950s, 1960s. And within this experiment, a child was given a marshmallow and they said, if you wait for 1 minute, if you come back, I'll give you another one. Anyway, what they discovered from this experiment, and they're still following the children from that experiment, but what they discovered was the children who had the ability to wait, that delayed gratification, they went on to be the happiest in themselves. I'm not just talking about happy in their workplace or in their personal life, but overall, the happiest in themselves. Now, they decided to revisit this about 3 years ago, because they felt there wasn't enough diversity, there wasn't enough inclusion. And before they did that, they sent out a questionnaire to ask anyone who worked with children, whether it was paediatricians, whether it was social workers, anyone at all. And the main question was, the children that we have at present, do we think that their instant gratification is so much higher than their delayed gratification? And as they thought, from the questionnaire, 83% said yes. When they started this study, and obviously it's still continuing, to their absolute surprise, it's the complete opposite. The children of today have better delayed gratification, and they were trying to ask, so why is that? And it's very much around the idea, the hypothesis so far, is that you as young parents now, you are far more autonomous in your parenting. So, I grew up where children are meant to be seen and not heard. And it was there's a big difference between authoritative and authoritarian. That's the landscape in which most of us grew up, my generation. But you were the younger children, so what I really immediately thought of, which is why I gave this explanation, is our children are going to be having a greater voice because we've allowed them. Now we've got to be also mindful that we're helping to build that self-regulation with our children too, because there was another study from 2019 from the London School of Economics, huge study, and what they discovered, the single most definite predictor of long-term happiness is. So again, all of these elements are saying to us we have a duty of care with all our children, but also within the workplace. And your role is so valuable, is trying to help give that voice. So what would be a typical strategy, if I may ask, to help, particularly a woman, to find her voice? Now obviously every case is different, but...
So in the workplace or in general, in the workplace, yeah. I think, so it would be about working with the woman to understand initially what is their starting position. So how do they feel that their voice is coming across right now? Do they feel like they actually have a voice in the workplace? If they are trying to raise their voice in the workplace, what's actually happening is what's the response to that? What's the culture? Are there other female leaders in the workplace as well? So I think there's a whole mixing pot of kind of context that comes into that. And then I think it really does come down to how does that woman want to communicate themselves in the workplace? What it is that they want to really stand for? What is the level of change that they want to bring about? And I think when you start to solidify a lot of that as well, then you can start to really, and the thing is as well is, it's almost fun to start playing around with certain things as well. So it's almost about, we spoke yesterday about having a growth mindset as well, which plays into some of what you were just talking about, and that's, having a growth mindset is being open to the challenge, basically, and being able to put yourself out there and not actually being afraid of failure. And it's one of the biggest things that you can get past. Being okay with the fact that things are going to change for you and life is going to change, you are going to change with that, but also the fact that you can put yourself out there and it really doesn't matter if you feel that you get it wrong, because actually what is wrong anyway? So it's kind of developing your own voice, almost a bit like through trial and error, but always thinking about the fact that it's fun, it's experimental, and it should be something that's quite creative, and it really does start to then come from you as well.
So I also would love to learn yoga, and I really try, because I know yoga plays such an important part with our sleep. And I remember I was failing miserably at doing the tree pose, and he said, don't worry, that wobble is going to make you stronger. And I think that in itself, these wobbles that we have, these challenging times, that's where we really build our resilience. It's also resilience, and it's also learning from that as well. And so it comes back to the identity piece, because when we've gone through change, we can sometimes beat ourselves up around the fact that, why do I not understand myself anymore? This is me, I should understand myself. How have I got this so wrong? But actually, it's looking back at everything that you perceive to be a failure or a negative change that's happened in your life, and trying to convert that and thinking about, well, what have I learned through that situation? What are the additional resources that I never knew that I had, such as 9 times out of 10 it will be resilience, amongst other things that you never knew you were possibly going to have in that situation as well.
Would anyone like to ask a question? Maybe have a question? So many. Oh, that's very positive. Would you like to ask a question? No, Carina?
So, first of all, thank you very much. It's been a lovely discussion, a lovely talk, so powerful, so important for women. I kind of didn't even know that this kind of professional help or support kind of existed as a coach. I mean, we know that there are so many life coaches, parenting, and then for relationships and everything, and I think it's super important. At some point during the talk, we discussed about the equality and in the working environments, and women and their voice, and if they know where they stand. I've done a little work around that, and I realized that it comes from our nature. The different approach, Julie gave an example as well in the fusion, female fusion, like how differently men came to the stand and women. And I've realized that it also comes from our nature. It's not only if we are trained or not, which probably is where you can come in and help the coaching part, right? But how do you deal and how do you actually approach this different nature that we have from the inside? So if I can be a bit more specific, for instance, from my experience, I see that men, it's not that they don't have the fear to bring it up and say, I'm this, I'm that, I want that, etc. And then women, they have, although they believe that, and they know they deserve that, they don't want to say, I'm this, I'm that, I do this, I do that, and I expect or I deserve this and that. So because it's not our way of communication, I guess, as women, and it comes from our nature. This is so far my understanding. Is there something different or something that even like from I'm missing or something that women can work on? And how do we support the different nature that we have?
Yes, there's probably, thank you for your question as well. There's probably a lot that I could say to that. I think, first of all, so men probably, and this is a huge generalisation, but more than likely haven't been told that they can't do something when they were younger. And it's not to say that we as women are told specifically you can't do that, but if I think about my own situation, so I was raised by my grandmother, and my grandmother was always very downtrodden because she grew up in the war in the UK. And so her perspective on things would be completely different to mine. And I'd be thinking, well, why is she so negative about these things? And I hadn't realised that it's still, even though I was much more proactive and more positive, it did rub off on me because I still believed that I wasn't necessarily worthy or entitled to certain things. So I think, again, it comes back to kind of understanding and working through, where does some of this thought process come from? Because I think for ages I used to fight with the fact that I was like, well, why do I not feel worthy? Because I'm nothing like my grandmother, and I'm using her specifically as an example, but there are many other examples. But I'd be like, well, I'm nothing like her because I'm so much more confident than that. But then I realised that there was actually a connection to that. And it's when you start to realise that you can then start to reframe your thoughts around that. And so now I understand where that actually comes from. So when I feel like that's coming up for me, then I can say, well, actually, no, it's coming from this place, and then choose to take the thought that would be opposing to that. And I think the other thing as well you touched on is communication. We're never going to communicate in the same way as men, but nor should we want to as well, because we have our feminine energy. And I think that there's a lot to be said for being able to talk from the heart. Men come in and they say, yeah, I've done this and I've done that, and blah, 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 blah. 9 times out of 10, if you ask them, how did you do that? And what exactly did you do? A lot of that might, and again, this is a generalisation, but some of that might be bravado. And yet if we come in and we say, actually, no, I've done this, there's 2 things here that I've raised, not 10, but just 2, and these are the things that I've done and how I've done them and why I've done them, actually there's a lot more meaning to that. So I think it's knowing the benefits of our feminine energy, being able to use those, but also understanding where sometimes if we are self-critical, we feel like we're not as worthy as the next person in the room, just understanding where that feeling comes from. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's a beautiful answer, thank you. But also, as you say, historically, women, we are always coming from behind, but I do believe that's now changing, and I think it's how we're parenting and how we can, the whole nurture nature is also plays a part. How we now perceive our role in the future. So I think that plays a very big part. So as you're going back to your childlike self, if you could give just one piece of advice to your childlike self from where you are now, what would that be?
I think it would be have that level of self-belief, because I think it was probably, even though I was someone who put myself out there, and I've always put myself into scary situations, and I've always done things that my family probably looked at and gone, oh, why has she gone off and done that? That's crazy, But I never really believed that I could do these things. I was just kind of putting myself out there because why not? I wasn't content, I guess, with the life that I had. But I think, had I developed that self-belief when I was younger, I just think, imagine it wouldn't have been different. I still would have done these things, but I would have done them with a lot less fear and a lot more confidence. And it's something that I still think now. So I think it would be self-belief. Yeah.
Oh, so thank you so much. I have actually taken personally so much from this conversation and around that belief system. I have to say, one of the things I absolutely love about Dubai is that you can you can do, and I think it's quite a unique country, and that's what it's taught me on so many levels, and I hope to give that to my daughters as well, to say you can do. So thank you so much for
Thank you so much. Thank you.
But again, one of the beauties that I have seen in researching both of you and looking at where we are is you working together as a couple. And at the very beginning, when we had Ashleigh on, and Ashleigh was saying about her working as a couple with her husband, that's the only way that they can have what they have, and not to be frightened to have that, to verbalise it. So, just in terms of how you two met, because I just think this is a really amusing story, so how did you both meet?
In a very tiny nutshell, I met him on the front row of his gig. I bought tickets to, my mum and dad were big fans of his stand-up, so as a gig, Dad bought them tickets.
I don't know if you've seen Baby Reindeer. In the end, I just had to give in. I was like, please let me out of the cellar. She went, only if you marry me. And that's how we met. No. I was on stage, there was a beautiful woman in the front row, I was very professional, I did my show, and I said to my tour manager afterwards, gosh, I bet I never see that girl again. I'd only just come out of a relationship, so it wasn't like I was ready to pursue something actively. And then we just found each other. I'd done a joke on stage about this fake fur coat she was wearing, basically mocking her for thinking she was so posh she wore fur to the theatre, and I'm tearing it off my body and saying, I bet when you wax your legs, mink fur comes off. So that was the joke. I don't think you had to be there. A couple of weeks later, I just fired the word minky into the air. I didn't hashtag the gig, I didn't say who was at my gig in Manchester. Just, some us comedians will just tweet silly words sometimes. But she saw it, Baby Reindeer saw it, and she said to her friend, pretend you've seen it and connect me up with him on Twitter. And we did, we went out for a date, and that was it. It was one of those dates, we just talked for 7 hours. And then married, babies. On my wedding ring it says you have your minky on the inside. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary a couple of weeks ago. So, yeah. I said that's the God's telling me.
So, again, I'm sure your hormones played a part there in bringing you together. So, I know you have talked about it in the past of, what it was like when you first had your daughter, who is now, she's 8. Yeah. So when you first had your daughter, and what were those feelings that were really quite overwhelming? And again, I love your honesty around this area.
I think, realistically, probably I did have a bit of postnatal thing, but I never spoke to anybody about it. I think what it is, when I suppose in Dubai it happens a lot when you have certain types of privileges and people make you feel like you're not allowed to have those feelings. Like I wasn't in charge of how I was feeling, I couldn't switch it off, but when you find that it's really important to have a great circle around you, because if you say, I'm feeling this way, and someone doesn't hear you and give you all the reasons why you shouldn't feel that way. Well, you shouldn't feel like this because you've got X, Y, and Z, you've got all these different things, and you've got all these external things that actually mean everything I'm feeling, how I'm feeling. And I think it's just really important to process it and feel it, and it is a temporary feeling, and you just have to have the right circle around you.
Do you also think it was that nobody prepared you for what was going to happen after the baby? Because, as a midwife, often I would hand this baby to the mummy, and I'd be so aware of the expectations and the pressures. And, unfortunately, Russell, it's not quite the same, I don't believe. I think it's getting better, but I don't believe the pressures are quite the same on the man. But it's recognising that the minute that baby is put into our arms, we don't become a mother. And yet all the expectations are there.
Yeah, I think we don't come with an instructions manual, which is terrifying, because what you do is you log on to social media and everyone looks like they've got everything together. I remember a friend of mine, we had a C-section a few weeks apart, and the next day she was pushing us down, laughing. I couldn't, I had to go into fetal position when he made me laugh, or if I needed to sneeze or cough. I couldn't stand up for 2 weeks, but I'm logging in online, seeing all the glam mums. And I'm like, you just naturally start to compare yourself. So I think, again, it's just about being kind to yourself and not focusing on what other people are doing and comparing yourself. It is such a hard time, it's such an adjustment. I've not really been around kids, so I thought, oh, I'll be fine. But actually, this baby was put in front of me, and I was like, oh my God. I went back to being quite childlike myself, because I had no idea. Could somebody help me? Somebody show me what to do? I had no idea. This comes very natural to me, is what I'm trying to say, and I think I would look at other people where it has come naturally to them, and why am I finding it so hard?
There was also, it's like the opposite problem, where everyone's prepared you for what you definitely will. All everyone was saying was, mate, you'll look down, you'll hold that baby, and everything will make sense. You'll have an overwhelming feeling of emotion, and it'll be a love that you've never experienced before. I'm sure many of you had that. But some of us look down and go, is there something wrong with me? Am I a serial killer? Am I dead on the inside? Do I not love my child? My male friends told that to me. My best friend, the third partner in our business, we've been friends since we were 8, we met at swimming lessons. He was like, Russ, you're going to collapse on the floor, you'll be crying and overwhelming. I just looked down and went, oh, there's something wrong with me. It took me 18 months when my daughter started speaking, and then it was like dropping into an ocean. The love is so overwhelming. It took me 18 months to bond. And I was like, there must be something wrong with me. So the pressure for a woman, because I'll never forget it, it was C-section, so I'm in my shower cap, watching the alien horror movie unfold in front of me, and this human life burst out of my wife's abdomen. And I hope you don't mind me saying this, they went, there we are, Mrs. Kane, would you like to hold the baby? She was like, no, do you mind putting my kidneys and stuff back in first? And then there's a guilt. Why did I instantly want the baby attached to my boob? It's because you got cut open on a hospital gurney. I then had to whip my top off, which is what we do in the UK, so the baby could have heart-to-heart contact with someone related. And I knew this was a possibility, and I'm so vain, I put spray tan on the day before. I then transferred spray tan to a newborn baby's face, and the whole thing, you just feel guilty. You feel like, I'm so consumed with vanity, I failed the first moment, and then you're on a negative spiral of, oh, I've got it wrong. Of course, it's nonsense. There is no right path you're supposed to tread, and you will on with your child. Nature finds a way. But the guilt for women, so Lindsey had to pretend, oh yeah, I was subbing into the most complete memory, but it wasn't. It was like, okay, now what?
Yeah. No, honestly, I really believe that as a woman, we get an extra gene, and that's the guilt gene, which I truly don't believe that a man gets, which could be very sexist. But the other thing is that, you know, if I'm working with my parents and they've got very small children, and the pressure that they put on themselves that every minute you've got to spend with your child, because, you know, that first year is so important, and you've got the next 18 years to build this relationship. You haven't got to concertina everything in. So, just going back to when your little girl was first born, and then gradually, how did you come out of that fog?
I think I've only just recently, probably in the last few years, really, because I was so consumed with what people will think. Oh, I can't, you know, I've got to act a certain way or be a certain way because people think certain things, or I think I've done a life's audit with friends and family, and the people that don't make me feel good about myself or that bring me down, I've cut ties with, and that's been the biggest change.
I made the cut.
Yeah, he made the cut, he's allowed to stay in. But I think that's really important because you don't realise other people's energy, if they're negative, they make you feel rubbish about yourself and they run you down. It changes your life, it really does when you cut those people out.
In terms of now, again, you're very much working together as a couple, and you have created this business, which is, you know, the buzzword at the minute, and it really is a buzzword in terms of longevity. And so, where did this concept come up? You have some supplements that you that you've created in order to improve people's mental health, which is lots of different things. So, how did that happen?
Well, basically, Russell had been trying and experimenting with all different scientifically backed, evidence-based supplements over the years, and I was seeing his energy change, his skin, because he's got a high energy stand-up. And then after I had Minna, I just had this overwhelming fear of mortality, and I was like, I'm going to die. I'd never thought about it before, never thought about dying, thought I was going to live forever. And, you know, I was really concerned about my health, and I wanted to live as long as I possibly could, but with, you know, my health. I don't want to be 100 and be in a home for the last 30 years of it. And also just said, why don't you start trying to take all these different supplements, and I did. And it made a huge difference, you know, to my mental health, my being, my energy, hair, skin, everything. And sleep as well, which obviously is an issue when you have a baby. And then we had a lot of people asking, what are you doing, what are you taking, how do you make those changes? And I just said, there's nothing on the market that's combining everything so it's convenient. So I said to us, do you think people would buy it? So we said, well, let's try it. We did, we launched it, we sold out within a day. And we've just done our clinical trials, and Ross, I know I'll bring you in. Go on. Yeah. What about this?
You can talk now.
Yeah, that's a good description of how it started. My wallet blackmailed me into. It's weird because longevity. I wouldn't say John was particularly interested in longevity. I'm not interested in whether someone lives to 65 or 105. What I'm interested in is in health span. So not longevity, healthgevity or health span, whatever word you want to use. The percentage of those years in which you're vitally engaged in a life, feel young. I was doing a survey at the Baby Expo the other day, and I didn't find anyone who chose to have 40 years more life. So if you live to 65 or 105, you can be as energetic as you are at 25 and 65, or you can have 40 years of frail, but you get to see AI in the future. Everyone's like, I'm checking out at 65. So what that tells me is, health span is more important than life span. Quality is more important than quantity. So I was doing this high energy stand-up act. I come from poorer backgrounds, everything started late, my degree started late, I had my babies late, everything late. And I was starting to get tired on stage of a very high energy act. So I started with the stuff, the most important things you don't get in a bottle. Stress management, sleep. Sleep number one, of course. Sleep, stress, diet, exercise. Not even exercise, moving. Yeah. Did all of those, and then that's when I started layering evidence-based supplements. So all my friends mocked me, oh, you can't get younger, what a load of rubbish. And over the last 15 years, they've all gone a little bit quiet as they've turned into old men.
He's 49 in
I'm 49 in August, and I can't do Botox, can't do filler. I can't do anything. I'm not against any aesthetics, but the humour in the UK, if a British comedian was to put Botox in his forehead, I'd be toast, I'd be mocked. So I have to do everything from the inside out. So on a cellular level, my bloods, everything we check, hormonally, muscularly, about 31, 32 years old, which is where I need to stay to hit my commercial goals. It was like you said, not enough oxytocin, I was focused on that. So Lindsey's come along with the emotional version of this.
Yeah, perfect balance.
She's like, what are the top 7? This is it. She's like, what are the top 7? She went, I'm going to combine them, we'll get JOLT. So I said, these are the 7 with the best evidence. Turn them into JOLT, like 3 pills once a day. This is not for people that aren't making changes to the other pillars of sleep, stress, diet. It's not for you. It's not for stress Burger King eaters. Don't waste your money. Don't give us. Not interested in your euros or pounds or dollars. This is for people who are making those first changes and want to turbocharge the changes they're making. And then Lindsey, fair play to her, said we're going to do a clinical trial. I don't know if you're aware how risky that is. If you put your actual, if any one of you to launch a skincare supplement or a anti-aging or health span supplement and put it into trial, if you don't make people younger in that trial, your business is finished. Ta-ta, gone. So that's why 99% of the things you'll see, people reported feeling younger after 6 weeks, they can legally say that. We can legally say, hormonally and muscularly, we made our subjects younger. One of the 60-year-old, yeah.
We work with doctors, obviously we're not scientists, so we work with doctors to help formulate everything.
Yeah, we've got a GP doctor on board who faces consumers and asks questions, oh, I'm pregnant on this and that. And then we've got a Harley Street scientist, top scientist who did the trial in Harley Street. And so one of our subjects was a 60-year-old menopausal Brazilian woman, another was an Asian male 24-year-old person trained. So it's a diverse group, and everyone's, I think testosterone is another thing, would be a great thing to talk about.
For women and men, it's really important for both of us.
I mean, if this is a women's hormone talk, my learning journey about testosterone in the female body has gone from 0 to professor level. And as soon as you say testosterone, a lot of women get scared. Why would I want my testosterone to go? You're talking hair, nails, mood, recovery from viruses, healing from injuries, and how can I phrase it in a friendly, interpersonal marriage energy. All of those things are controlled by testosterone, not estrogen. So it's really, really really important for women, particularly women past 29, past 39. You've got low testosterone. Yeah, after birth, you're going to know about it. So I was completely ignorant, but what's shocking is so many females are ignorant. Oh, what's my estrogen? What's this? What's your testosterone like?
Yeah, so I mean, testosterone as a hormone is a really important aspect of our recovery and every single day. But just going back to something that you were saying before was that, you know, even now, the fog is just beginning to clear, although not completely. And I remember when I was studying to be a health visitor back in the UK, and we were studying to be a practitioner around postnatal depression. And the psychologist had just come from one of the clients that she had interviewed. Now the client was certainly in her 60s, 61 or 62. And this woman, who was 61 or 62, has said, finally, is this what it's like not to have postnatal depression anymore? Wow. She had gone all of those years, for 40 odd years, having postnatal depression and having no idea that this wasn't normal. Wow. Not at all. So this is where these conversations are really important. Talking about the different hormones, helping us all understand about the importance of testosterone as to how that brings that balance around. You know, those three hormones of the progesterone and estradiol, which is, you know, a multiple of estrogen and estradiol. So we've really got to be looking at where these hormones are coming into place. But we were talking before about how we can bring that into the arena where it's available, that these conversations are available for everyone, male and female. We've got to get the males on board, really got to get them on board. During, you know, the last 8 years, and you helping find out who you are and where we're going, and it's such a huge question. Again, it's very much about being together as a team. But with your daughter, how do you feel you want to influence her? Because that's all we can do with our children. It's about influencing our children.
Yeah, I think I've only just realised that in the last year that everything that I do or say, she will eventually go and do a version of it. So how do I want? I'm being mindful of, you know, how I speak to her about myself. You know, do I talk about, oh, I hate my body, or oh, I can never wear a bikini because I don't, you know, all these things are being put into that little head. You know, and I think it's, you know, just little things like, oh, she's beautiful. Well, we don't want to base a woman's worth on beauty, and I think that a lot of the times it is. Like as I was recently speaking to Russell, and I've been working with women and helping them either get into business or, you know, empower them in some way, and I've really enjoyed it. And I had a woman send me a message going, well, that thing that you said to me a few months ago, it's changed my life, it's done this to my career. Thank you so much. She gave me a lovely compliment, and I cried, and Russell was like, why are you crying? I said, because it's the first time I've been complimented on how I've made someone feel. And it's not, you know, because I'm a makeup artist as well, originally, it's like, oh, your makeup's nice, your outfit's nice. We, as a woman, we tend to stick our worth on the external, how we look and how others perceive us. And I said, I've never had that where someone's, that I don't know, has said, what you've done there has made me feel a certain way. And so I'm trying to communicate that in a way where my daughter doesn't find me really annoying and call me Miss Positivity all the time. So it's about, I'm just trying to be mindful of that, you know.
And that's really important. There was a woman who was a very senior exec within Google, and she has 3 children. And she said, of all the policies of your children, she was asked the question, of all the policies of your children, what do you deem to be the most important? And then, you know, she was such a high achiever within Google and went on to do even more incredible things. She said, the one thing that I want my children to be as adults is kind. And
the word I was saying in my head.
Kind, yeah. I mean, how? Because, you know, I remember a lecturer from Harvard, and he said, it's not where you got your degree from, it's how you have made somebody feel. And I think in the world that we are growing up in now, you know, our children are growing, I think ethics is a big part, because I think ethics seems to be lost at the minute if we're looking at what's going on in the world. And if we can instill that within our children, about where these ethics are coming from and how, you know, what our values are, which is a very big part of the conversation today. That's really important. So would you say the same in terms of?
I mean, obviously I've got into the business of making people feel great on a night out. So I think with people who have an awful week, you can come to a comedy night and laugh till you cry, and it's genuine. The laughter is a great way to raise oxytocin and all those hormones. But so far as having a sort of revolution in empathy and ethics and morality, which is what I think we're talking about, I think we've fallen into a habit of thinking that learning about something online or having a Zoom call or sending a WhatsApp message, you okay, is the same as real world conversations. They might be difficult conversations between our political leaders or our spiritual leaders. It's not the same as me. Oh, I've scrolled today, felt sorry for someone, I've done my bit. It's not good enough. You know, we forget we're human beings, and we learned this the hard way during COVID. And we are programmed by seeing each other, feeling each other's energy, and shaking hands, human contact. You know, we are of that genus. You know, we're a touch-based species, a contact-based species. We could have done this on Zoom today. We've all on Zoom screens and said the same words in the same way. What's the difference? The difference is, I'm right, it feels different, doesn't it? So if we had a bit more of that in the world, and also what's happening in the UK, I have no idea what's happening in this region, is our young people are scared to sit down with people that think opposite to them and have a kind, respectful discussion. I must sit with people that agree with me. Is it safe space?
I do believe we're creating sheep.
It's dangerous. It's also, I think, sorry to get a bit dark, but hate is like a bouncy castle. If you push down, it will pop up somewhere else. Right? You've got to have these chats with people you disagree with. It doesn't matter what it is, religion, politics, boundaries, gender back home. Have these difficult discussions in a respectful way. We might not agree, but we'll learn something about each other. We'll have an empathetic appreciation of the other person's humanity. That is the first step in progress.
Now, I know Lindsey's wanting to come in, but I just want to say that if we look at all the parenting books that have gone up, you know, every single parenting book up until kind of 59, 1960s, they are all about reward-based parenting. You're either good or bad. That's all they are. And so, thankfully now that is changing, because there is still so much of us within our fibre, you know, we're meant to be seen and not heard, not having that voice, but exactly what you're saying, it is about being respectful. And our children learn that from the very beginning. Now, for me, certainly, with my daughters, one of the most important elements here was that we sat and ate together as a family. Now, research or not, but the research shows us very clearly that when we sit together as a family, there are so many skills that our children will develop. They learn negotiation skills, they learn critical thinking skills, they learn social skills, they learn language skills, simply from sitting down at the table. And I think we're moving just a little bit too far away from that, and we have a responsibility, a duty of care to bring that back. You know, I have parents, and I know the world is so busy, and you know, and I'll say, so how many times do you sit together as a family if there is an issue around eating, for example? And it's like, well, we can't because, I'm really sorry, I totally disagree in that there are 21 occasions in a week where you can find to sit down as a family. And that's when you have this safe space where the children can talk about what they think and give them that. But if we don't do that at the beginning, they're not going to do it later.
So there is, sorry, Lindsey, I don't know if we can make something, but there is an epidemic of going, well, we all sit down as a family. I'm not judging you, listen. We are not. We are struggling in every aspect of parenting. The one thing I will not tolerate is a screen at the dining. We sit down for dinner. And I don't judge anyone that does it, because we use the iPad to get through a plane journey. My daughter plugs into the Matrix for 24 hours to Australia. I'm no angel here. But if we're talking about the sacredness of a meal together, does it count if we're at the table but your 4-year-old's watching Mr. Tumble? Probably not. I totally empathise and understand that, because I've got there in other aspects of my life which shouldn't be on the iPad. And I think there's a false beginning of, well, we do have dinner together. But the secondary question is, why are you on devices?
I think it's about connection as well, and like you're saying about having devices at the table, I think it's for adults as well. You know, we have a no phone policy, especially when we're eating, or even at night time if we're sitting down watching TV together, we get our devices away and we're watching consciously the same thing together. We talk about it. You know, it's different to being on a device, having something on in the background. You're not truly in tune with it. You're not connected together.
You're engaged in different
Yeah,
things, like nature, separate.
And so, you know, we say it all the time, you know, especially when we have like family gatherings, I'll have an auntie who's just got Facebook and is addicted to it. I'm like, just come home, be by yourself on your device, because why are you here? You know, what's the point of
But again,
not
that's
being connected?
not being connected, and that's the thing, you know, we're the most connected in terms of all our devices, yes, the most disconnected than we've ever been in our world. And also, I know back in the UK, for example, they've introduced a new subject into the curriculum whereby it's showing children how to read faces, because now they spend so much time on their devices that the children have actually lost the ability to read your expression. This is really worrying, but it's us that have the voices. It's like, for example, there's some really great new studies very, very recently, and they're showing that when children have extended use of the screen, we are actually, it's showing with the MRI imaging, we are thinning the prefrontal cortex of our children. That's not scary in terms of, I'm not saying that to scare you. This is hard research, and where are we going within the future? And partly it's due to the fact that in schools now, they still think they're in COVID. So they're still teaching as if we're in COVID. We're not in COVID anymore, so get the screens out of the classroom, and that's where we can help. And again, that as us as parents, we can help.
Whatever the law is for cigarettes should be for smartphones, in my opinion. And that's been, I know the UK gets a lot wrong, hashtag Brexit. But this week they're talking about it being illegal for a child to have a smart device, iPad or under 16. Illegal, with a warning instead of a rotting lung or a rotting brain. That's how serious this research is being taken. I don't know what we're going to do. It'll be like train spotting. We have to lock her in a bedroom like you and McGregor did.
I think as well with the always constantly being online, and you know, a lot of women that I work with and our staff that help us with JOLT, that, you know, I'll message them at a certain time and they'll come back to me and they go, sorry, I haven't come back to you. And I'm like, we have to stop apologising for not coming back straight away. Just because someone can access us immediately, either social media or on phone, stop apologising for not going back straight away. You know, like back in the day where you used to, you know, send a letter and wait for it to be received, we've lost that touch.
Yes,
and I think start apologising, because then we're teaching the next generation of kids, if you don't respond straight away, you know, got to apologise, you know, continuously apologise, and that will mess with their mental health.
So, I mean, there was so much that you said there in terms of it's having the ability to know when enough is enough, setting expectations, but all of that comes from so many different aspects of, you know, how we are the greatest teachers of our children in terms of our modelling. That's not just about of our children, it's modelling in society. And we have, like you say, put the phones down. We have, you know, when we're out at the restaurant, and that kind of pressure is going to help as well. But it's about giving other people the tools to do that. So just coming back to JOLT and how it's benefiting in many, many aspects, and one of them being our mental health, because we know, for example, that GABA, which is a neurotransmitter, very often when that is depleted, you know, our sleep is impacted, our brain is racing. So it's not a drug at all. It's a natural neurotransmitter which every now and again through busy modern life becomes depleted. So when you're saying about the 7 ingredients within the supplement, how did you arrive at those ingredients?
You started it 15 years ago, so you're...
I was taking like a bit silly sort of Elon Musk around at the start of the day. So Lindsey just said to me, which are the top 10 with the best evidence either on mammals or small human trials that aren't pharmaceutical in any way. We're in the Middle East and everything here is absolutely fine. You can buy it on Amazon and get it delivered the next day. So the people are uneducated about these compounds they reach that are vitamin D and vitamin C, all this good stuff. But where people don't understand aging or even what aging is, I knew we got old, I didn't understand the process of aging, what it actually is. Once you understand those and how they've slowed that process down in the trial, it was an easy list of which 7 have aced the most trials, putting those together into one, and then doing our own trial and our combined one to prove that we're not talking, rubbish. It was as simple as that. And aging, when it was explained, you don't need to be a scientist to understand aging. There's only 2 aspects. We're all going to be older tomorrow. Spoiler alert. But there's only 2 aspects to it. Every day you wake up, you've got to make new cells. You know that cliche of if we saw each other in 7 years' time, every single part of us would have been replaced. So you're making millions of cells. And we're not digital machines, we're not terminators, we're analog. So do you remember photos, for those old enough to remember photocopies? If you take a photocopy of a photocopy of a photo, it gets fainter and less accurate. That's what's happening, and that's what aging is. We do our best with DNA and writing out the code every day, mistakes are made. Eventually old. That's one aspect of it, that's all aging is, an inefficient copying. The second aspect is throwing out the cells that have died the day before. Big bin bag, throw them in the bin. You do that great till you're about 30, but evolution, we're supposed to all pop our clocks at 40 once we've passed our genes off. We live in this wonderful, we develop 12, but we live into 100. Your body's got no interest in clearing bin bags out. So how can you accelerate those 2 aspects? More accurate copies of your cells and better disposal of the junk from the day before. That's all aging. There is no other facet to aging. Obviously there's external factors that can impact those 2 processes, but they are the only. I'm simplifying massively, apologies for any scientifically trained people, but I've had it explained to me so I can explain it to people without science degree. More accurate copies of new cells, chuck out the bin bags. That's what people in their 20s do. That's what I'm doing more efficiently through diet and exercise. That's why I don't look like my poor 50-year-old mates.
I think as well, like for me, I'm not science background, I haven't got the brain capacity to go through all these research, science I've got no interest in it. I just want to simplify it, and I think most people are quite like me. You want a simplified version, and it's all, that industry in itself is very male, very techy and difficult to understand, and I was like, people like me miss out massively. And just going back to the bin bag analogy, I like to say it's like a rotten strawberry. So if you get a strawberry in a punnet, a basket, it rots all the strawberries around it quicker, and that's what's happening to these dead cells. It'll age the cells around it, which speeds up the feeling and looking of being older than you are. So it's about clearing those out to delay the negative effects of aging.
So every cell has batteries in the middle, like AAA batteries. Mitochondria is the science. We don't use any sciencey word, they're called mitochondria if you're interested. So we just give in more power to those batteries through sleep, stress, diet, exercise, evidence-based supplement. The more power those batteries have, the slower you will age. And social, going full circle, social contact, proper meal times, checking in with each other is one of those ways to age more slowly. One of my favourite books, which is accessible to the general reader, is called The Village Effect by Susan Pinker, a relative of the philosopher Stephen Pinker, who looked at the evidence for social contact having an effect on ageing. Because there's certain aspects in the men die before women, everywhere on the globe. Ladies, you get one little party at the end and I'm gone. Except in certain areas of the world. Why in this part of Italy, for example, the men and women all live to 100 at the same rate? Because of the geographical quirk of living on a mountainside, the old men can't isolate themselves socially. So it's cousins, grandchildren, wives, sisters, so they're getting the same social contact by force that women do naturally because of their different oxytocin in their brain wiring. As soon as you have that, women stop out-surviving men. There is your evidence that real-world social contact is what will keep you alive longer. Not Zoom, not WhatsApp. And they did a study on breast cancer survival rates. And they took people that thought negatively about breast cancer, what's the point, versus, I'm going to fight cancer and I'm going to beat it, right? There was no survival benefit, positive thinking. It was marginal. You had a nicer time during treatment. The group that out-survived were the ones that had other females and men in a social group. How's your chemo? How are you? How's your husband? More powerful than positive thinking. So we've done full circle here. We could almost have a fifth pillar.
Yeah.
Human contact, meal times, checking in. This is why religious people live longer than people that don't have religion, because we're gathering together in mosque or church or wherever once a week and checking in with each other. This is why married people live longer than single people. There's nothing magical about marriage, although the effect is slightly more marked in men. It turns out, girls, you're okay being single. But married men die sooner because no one's checking in on them. They're just playing PlayStation till they're 80 and then their brains explode.
So there were so many elements there as to why women outlive men.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the things that made me really aware of it was, back in the UK, when you reach 100, you get a letter from the Queen. And this letter from the Queen says, well done, you reached that 100. What they were seeing was that there was, I think it was 82% of the people who received this 100 telegram from the Queen, 82% were female.
Right.
And then they all started to ask that question, why? Where is that coming from? And then that's when they started to take on more and more about the blue zone. And the blue zone is very much about where you have these communities of people living much, much longer, Italy being one of them. And it is about human connection. But also diet, huge. And supposedly other elements too, but it's been very much part of the community, their mindset. It's like, if we're looking at journaling being a really helpful tool for sleeping, for men, journaling is 30% more effective for men than females, and it is because men don't actually talk very much. And so in order to help switch that brain off, they take it out and put it down and out of their thoughts, and then that helps them sleep. So all of these things, we are now really gathering the evidence. We've just got to walk the talk. We know about sleep, it's so important. And, I will often say that the only thing that is more important than sleep is breathing. However, there are, like you say, all these other pillars of health that are impactful.
So I was going to say, when I'm hormonal and I'm really hungry and I'm annoyed, and I've just started to journal. So, especially during that time of the month, and I have to say it's made a massive shift. So where I would normally go, I'm annoyed, have you done this? Or, and saying what I actually think and causing devastation to potential relationships, I'm journaling. And it's massively helped because then I sleep on it, and then the next day I'm like, oh, it actually wasn't that bad. And then I don't send it, and I've got the relationship intact. So I highly recommend that's a massive change that I've made over the last few months. And if you've got something on your mind, or you've got an issue with a family member or a friend, instead of saying it, and then write it down, and then the next day read it back and see if you still feel the same.
But it is very much as well about coming back to where we really first started, about not diminishing where we are in terms of, oh, she's just hormonal. It's these chemical reactions that are going on in your body are so powerful. We need to be mindful that actually this is out of my control, and this is how I'm feeling. And it's finding a way, and especially with your little girl, to prepare her that all of these different feelings are coming up. And if you can do that, she will have less of an effect than what it had on you. So it's again about open communication and having those conversations. So one of the questions that we've asked all of our guests, if we were to look at, the one piece of advice that you would give to your childlike self, what would it be?
It's something that I've learned in the last year is not to care what people think. In terms of judgment, that don't dim your light or be anything else other than who you are. Don't belittle yourself or make yourself small just to please somebody else. If someone is saying, oh, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, well, that's their rules, that's their limitations, it's not necessarily you. So, just be yourself.
Yeah, I love that too.
Lift weights earlier, eat more chicken. I suppose Lindsey's right. We had this conversation, the very question. We were having like a deep chat balcony night, and we were both like, what would you tell your 16-year-old self if they were in front of you? And I was trying to think of something profound rather than something silly like I just said. When Lindsey said that, I was like, that's literally the most important thing. Men are much less affected by this. But I'm a comedian, for example. And there are comics. The most successful comics are the ones that care the least and overthinking about, 10,000 people in the arena enjoyed it, but that one person didn't understand it, and they lose sleep about it. So there's a power. We're not talking about hurting, we're not talking about offending, we're not talking about breaking whatever your social norms and rules are for your religion or circle. But we're talking about not being held back with a sort of inner blush based on, no, if I take this risk, what will people think? When you stop doing that, it's basically the same advice. You open yourself up to more successful relationships, more successful businesses, more successful. And it can be someone you love and adore like a mum, who means that, oh, be careful, you don't embarrass yourself there. You're going on at my mum today, you're going on a panel that's women's hormones, are you sure it's appropriate? You know, you don't want to be mansplaining. I could have just not turned up if I'd overthought it. I'm like, Mum, I don't care, I'm here with a good heart. I'm just going to go and see what
That's
happens.
the most important thing.
Yeah.
You're here with a good heart.
Yeah.
That makes the biggest difference. And also you care about Lindsey, so that's why you're here.
That's it, but yeah, but for women, I only know because what Lindsey said there is in my current tour show. I talk about it on stage with humour, but my shows aren't what you imagine. They've got these depth bits, and people cry at the end of the current one. It's about life, the end of life, that's the image. And the amount, I was shocked by the applause that broke out from the female members of the audience. When in the early pop show, I just said this aside, so if women could care what less people thought, and in their 20s rather than in their 50s, which is when a lot of women suddenly realise, oh my God, you know, shoot what everyone else thinks, they would have more sense. All these women burst out of applause, and I'm like, wow, this is a real epidemic of women censoring themselves and not expressing themselves commercially, creatively, romantically, whatever. And that's really sad, because I'm the father of a daughter, I'm a husband of a wife, I've got my mum who's this intelligent woman who's left school at 15 and just clean fat. There's nothing wrong with that. But did she do everything with her brain she could have done? Probably not. Why? There's a judgment to think, oh, I better stay in my lane, I better stay in my box.
And again, that's right from the beginning in that when I'm working with parents, and what I really, really want them to be is to be their children's emotional coach, not their emotional judge. So going back to right from the beginning about what you were saying, people comment about the makeup that you've done, your hair and so on. It's not about being good or bad. We don't want our children to think they are good, because good means what? That's your perception of good, but that might not be theirs. And it's not our children's responsibility to make us happy. And so I would just like
relationships as well. It's not just, you know, I think a lot of people, sorry to interrupt, but a lot of people think that what's missing in me, I must find in somebody else, and it's like that's not the case at all. You have to, everything needs within you, and then if you both are the best versions of yourself, that's where I do believe a better relationship.
Can I ask you a question? So I don't have anyone in the room going, so if it's not good, like what is it I'm trying to get my child to do? Can you help us? No, because I want, right, so this is practically you want to help your child not to be good or be reward-based. What is it we should be doing as parents then? What is it how do we guide them?
So for example, so if like, slightly different in terms of the good, and I'll come back to that in a minute. One of my families, their little boy was being quite physical. Now the first thing here is, it's completely normal. His impulse control before the age of 3 is very, very underdeveloped, which is why we say you would never ever put a child in a bed before the age of 3, because it's like expecting a 6-month-old to get up and walk. So she, whilst I was there, the little boy handed her helper a biscuit, and she was about to say, oh, thank you for doing that. That made me really happy. And it's like, no.
You're not supposed to do that.
That's why I asked.
No, I just, by you saying, but you're saying at the end, but we've done a caveat at the end, you've said, oh, you've done that, but. And it's like, thank you for doing that, that's made me happy. That is not your child's responsibility to make you happy from that action that you saw, because there could be another time where he felt he had to do it to make that person happy, and that was his learned behaviour. I'm doing this because I know that made my mummy or my daddy happy. That's not what we're wanting to do. We're wanting our child to do the thing that was correct and kind. So we're just taking us out of the equation.
So should you is anyone else applicant specifics here? Please take notes. I wish I could, I'm saying without them. So should we be saying, well done, that was correct and kind? Or do we vote, or do we just sort of nod mutely? How does this work?
No, we as parents, and just as human beings, our brain goes into, we are programmed to notice the bad and the unhelpful, the worst case scenario. That's how we've survived all these thousands of years. So what we constantly do as parents, and I know I did it too, but because of my work I had a slightly more awareness, but only slightly, and also my background. I didn't want to bring my background into my children. And so...
so the biscuit comes across.
Yeah, exactly. No. But we are very good at noticing when they did something wrong and did something wrong. We ignore the behaviour that we want. And as long as we keep ignoring the behaviour that we like, we're not going to get it. So the more attention we give to the behaviour we don't want, because that's how we are automatically programmed, that's what you're going to get. So it's about collaboration. It's really about collaboration.
Sorry to push you on it. How do I give my attention to that positive behaviour without implying it to make that person feel good?
Okay, so there's two things.
Is anyone else struggling with that?
Well, no, I know we're raising praise junkies. That's certainly what the science is telling us.
What a phrase.
Because, we are teaching our children that they can't do anything, can't move on until we praise them. That is not going to help them, because what the evidence is showing is that children are not doing as well in exams, for example, because they're being told you're so smart, you're so clever. So we want to be really focusing on the effort, not the outcome.
Right.
Really look at the effort. And so if you do see something that, your little girl has done, it would be, even later you might say, oh, I saw how you were looking after your cousin there. That's really lovely. And that will stay with her, that imprint, because that is going to stay with her. The other thing that you will do as well, and again, the studies here are really fascinating, the brain imaging. And I, again, thankfully had this so I knew that if one of the girls did something, so Tara was really lovely to her sister Melissa, and I would be saying to Kieran, within earshot, because the MRI imaging has shown us that it lights up that part of the brain and retain the information, I'd say to Kieran, you know something? Tara was really lovely to Melissa today.
Bottom of conversation.
And she absorbed that without me saying anything, because she went away and it's like, oh, it was noticed. Because the other thing is, I'm doing all this stuff and nobody pays attention, so it doesn't matter. I may as well just...
I've got a trick question. Is anyone else out here with other generations of family around them while they're raising their children? And you want to say you've got nanas and aunties. So if you hear them breaking all the rules that you've said, and you start sounding like this overly impede, I've just had therapy in one, and you follow the script I've learned, you get resistance. What's all the more rules to remember? So you get resistance from the extended tribe, which then causes tension. So anyone's come back from something like this, and we're not praising anymore, we're noticing. I'll see my mum's eye probably roll out the head and across the palm. So how do you manage the resistance from the elders that did it a different way? How to tackle that conflict?
Because you've got to come from a place where they're understanding this is not about permissive parenting. This is not about letting your children do anything. You're still holding the limits and still holding the boundaries, but actually in a really respectful way. Because, I can remember I was in a bakery back in the UK, and there was a little boy in front of me who would have been about 9 years old. The bakery was full, and everyone kept just crossing over this little boy. And I just thought, what is this teaching this child? And, I said, excuse me, this little boy's been in the queue, can we let him go first? So if this boy, within the hard wiring of his brain, and actually 9, 10-year-old is really important. There are 3 stages within our brain development. So the first one happens from conception to birth. The second is birth to the age of 3. And the final one, where we have what is known as pruning, is 10 to 13. So,
we're entering pruning.
Yeah, you're absolutely entering, and this is where you're going to have such an incredible impact when you can talk about collaboration and cooperation with your daughter. Step away from the old paradigm of it's about control and about being respectful to your elders.
Would you correct a nana if she's saying, oh, you made that person feel really nice, well done, which my mum would do, not thinking she's doing anything wrong? Does everyone know where I'm going with this?
No, you sit down later in that conversation with her and you say, Nana was saying this, and Actually, I'm just really nice. I'm just really proud of how kind you were. So we're still reinforcing, we're being respectful to her grandmother, but we're still reinforcing that. So sorry, we could talk for ages, and I'm really sorry.
I wanted to actually on the PDF sheet to follow as soon as I get back to Ripsos.
I am so happy that you've been part of our conversation. I really am, and I hope that you've all taken away something from really important.
I definitely have.
And look after yourselves, but also work together as a couple. Really, really important. So thank you.
Oh, I could probably just plug my show on Sunday.
Yes, please do. Go on.
I'm on the Queen Elizabeth QE2 lineup, which is more the Gantry, I'm performing on there on Sunday at their theatre. So if you fancy a nice comedy.
This is so high energy, your performance, and you'll see another facet of you,
Yes.
but actually, ultimately not. The essence is there.
It's 70-minute, it's not like watching a 10-minute stand-up bit. My shows have a theme and follow. So there's some deep stuff, there's some funny stuff, and yeah. If you fancy a night comedy, come on.
So thank you so much. Relationships, when I work with my families, I will often say to them around the sleep work, this is not child-centric, this is not parent-centric, it's actually relationship-centric. So a huge, huge thank you. And just in terms of being as, efficient as we can, please give yourself a full introduction.
It's late. My name is Marianne. I teach Pilates. That's what I say at parties when people ask me what I do. But really, I'm a prenatal and postnatal educator. I run workshops for trainers, but also for people, because I'm super, super interested in people having the happiest and healthiest life possible.
Yeah, thank you. And yet, we say that, quite rapidly. And if I think about my role as a midwife and a health visitor, the impact it has, that physical exercise, antenatally and postnatally on women's mental health is absolutely enormous. And I've seen it over all my years within my workplace. I remember one lady, fairly recently, she had a C-section. Now for her, exercise was really, really important. And I was going into after the baby was born, this is here in Dubai, I was going in after the baby was born, and I could see her mood going lower and lower. And she said to me, it was week 4, and she said, when do you think I can do my exercise? Because the doctor keeps saying to me 6 weeks. And I just said, you know what is going to be good for you. So if you go into the pool, you're very tuned, you are very responsible, so you go in and into that pool and try for 5 to 10 minutes, and then if 5 to 10 minutes and you've had enough, then come out. I saw this woman's mood absolutely increase so much more positively with just that one piece of exercise.
So that's the million dirham question. When do I go back to exercise, right? That's the one I get the most. And you have to know what the physical risks are to not exercise or to exercising too quick, but you also have to think of the mental health component to postnatal recovery. And I always say, I'm giving you the information from a physical perspective, but if you really have to go for that run, go for that run, because my sister went through something similar after her planned C-section. So with her first child, she had a planned C-section, and you know how you're supposed to rest so the scar can heal well. And sadly, we were all there to help, so it wasn't a case that no one was there or that she was isolated. But later on, her scar was a nightmare to work with later on. But she was like, I was going to lose it. So because she was picking up the dishes, tidying up the house, and I was like, we're here. Chill out. But I could tell that she was losing her sense of self by not being the helpful, on her feet woman that she's used to being.
So that movement.
So you need movement, but I also want to, I think it's important that women know. If women know and they choose differently, then that's their concern and they're empowered to do so. The problem is these days, women don't know. They're cleared at 6 weeks. Who here has been cleared at 6 weeks to do anything with, were you told you can do anything? Yeah, you were told you could do anything. And that's not the case. At 6 weeks, you're cleared to do postnatal nutritious movements, core rehabilitation, stretches, some core strengthening, some glute strengthening, but you can't go for, I mean, unless you're a unicorn, it's very rare to be climbing a mountain the day after.
I do feel that's all elements of being a mother as well. I mean, it's like, you know, at 6 months your child can start solids. What, is there something magical that goes off in a child's stomach and you can introduce food? It's about looking at each of our children. Some children will be ready at 4 months and some children will be ready at 5 months and 6 months. So it's that observational piece, which is really important. So having that, you know, point of reference, but knowing that it might not fit with you, it might not sit with you. So antenatally, how do you help prepare a mother for the changes that are going to happen postnatally? You know, particularly if we're looking at the hormonal elements, how does that come into your work?
Well, I think that I'm a core trainer, right? So it comes in handy for birth and for postnatal recovery. But I think if the better you take care of yourself during and you're protective of the tissues, for instance, you've got your separation happening, so your nutrition might want to include more collagen, and you want to prepare these tissues and work the transverse abdominis underneath, so that when you are postpartum, if you do feel the need to go for a workout, you're better trained to do so, you're better equipped. I see a huge difference between the women I train prenatally and the women I get in my postnatal program that I didn't train before. The recovery is not the same. It's just we haven't prepared the tissues, we haven't protected them to the same extent, and so that affects the hormonal. We all have the same hormonal changes happening, but we live through them differently depending on that preparation.
And I think there's so little research now, still so little regarding anything of women's health. You know, if we're looking at all the sleep literature, all the sleep research, up until late 1950s, early 1960s, was all carried out on men. There isn't a single piece of research and evidence that includes women. It was all on men. And it's the same now with the women's football team. So suddenly women now, in terms of football, are coming into the arena. And there's some really interesting research going on, is that women at certain times during their cycle, they are much more likely to have an Achilles heel injury. So that in itself is really fascinating. So does that...
That's fascinating. That's just something I'm very much interested in, and particularly discipline to discipline, sports to sports, because the research you're mentioning shows that when you're ovulating, if you're a football player, you're more likely to have an ACL or an Achilles injury. But what I've noticed in my people, because I teach yoga and Pilates, and there's more hip mobility involved and more bendy, is that most injuries happen in the PMSing phase. And I suspect that's because that's when the progesterone is, so I'm sure you've covered that this morning. So I suspect if you're doing more bendy, more pliés, more deep squatting, then just before your period, you're more vulnerable. But if you're into contact sports and running, because when you're ovulating, do you notice when you're ovulating that you're a bit more confident? And that your social skills are better. So I'm launching a podcast soon, and I've planned my secret. I've planned my interviews around the time just before ovulation and after, because that's when my speaking skills are more stellar. You know, and when I'm in my PMSing phase, I'm like, I want to retreat. This is the progesterone thing, speaking. I want to retreat. I'm a little less ambitious, not as confident. So I do think that with training, but also with all the social events that we attend, maybe Julie, since you're really good at what you do, but you want to schedule these events, around the dips, and I'm not sure.
Again, I think it's upbringing. So I grew up in a very strict Irish Catholic household, and we never, ever used the word period. That just wasn't allowed to be talked about. And so it wasn't something that was part of my vocabulary. I was made to feel ashamed, because of course we do know that during your period we are dirty. And that was
what I grew up around, and so it's just trying to not create those same habits. So it's within the hardwiring of my brain. So for me, it wouldn't even occur to me, even though I'm very aware, like just just before it happens, our cognitive function is definitely significantly higher. Our memory retention is also so much better, and our ability to take a stand back so we're less reactive. And that's all right before the actual phase. So again, it's so much about education. So do you have these conversations with your mothers in terms of, with your pregnant mothers?
I have it with them, of course, but when they're pregnant, they're not going through the cycle. So usually when a lot of women, when they're pregnant, because of the hormonal changes, yes, they might be a bit different in the sense that I never used to tidy up the house, and all of a sudden I was tidying up everything, and my husband's like, "Who are you? I didn't marry this." So, because I was giving him a hard time about it. But other than that, I'm much more chilled during pregnancy, and a lot of my mums are more relaxed and during pregnancy, and then the postnatal period is more or less intense, but usually more challenging, not just because of sleep deprivation, but because of that hormonal drop. And we lose our friend, the progesterone again. So I do have these conversations, but I'm also trying to educate them beyond that phase where, once you have your cycles again, how to work out around them, how to protect your tissues, but also know when to push yourself. So I started strength training 2 years ago. I don't like it. I just do it because I want to live long and organize Pilates retreats when I'm 85 and still be able to lead them. But
so it's that muscle mass.
It's that muscle mass and the bone density and just avoiding falls. And so I started strength training, and I am very mindful of when I go and 20 kilos or 30 kilos feel heavier than last time. Why? Because last week I was not in the same phase of my cycle, and I relate that to them, and we share. I think it's so important to share and to self-observe. Like you said, there's the science, the little science we have, and then there's you journaling or paying attention to which time of the cycle you notice specific action.
And actually, that is a conversation that I do hear frequently, that we are beginning to lose touch with ourselves because life is so busy and we are so distracted, particularly with the phone. I was very fortunate in that I grew up, the first 25, maybe even 30 years, I never had the phone. And if we look now, we all have a phone, and it is so distracting, and it's taking us away from who we are. And so we're not able to recognize what we should be feeling. It's even like the trackers, for example. The trackers are great in terms of helping us recognize patterns. But, I have so many clients who say they wake up in the morning, oh, I've had a great night's sleep. They look at the tracker and it says, you had a terrible night's sleep. We don't need something like this to tell us how good a sleep we had. We have to get back in contact, in touch with what those feelings that we are.
I think we lose touch, but I don't know why it is. It might be shame, it might be cultural, it might be that everything is so fast-paced. But dropping into the body is essential. I meditate, that's how I take care of my mental health. I've had a very long mental health journey. And I'm still actually, the reason I have to leave at 1 is because I have my appointment with my psychiatrist every week. But it's just meditating, taking that time to be bored, to observe how the voice in your head is very different from who you are in your essence. Is so important and healing to me. And so I'm trying during the prenatal classes, I teach reformer, so people come and want to work out, and I make it very hard, but I mostly make it very hard so they're safe, but also so at the end, when we drop down and when I offer breath work, it's received well. So it's like, oh, I need it, I'm done anyway. My hips, my glutes, everything is sore.
But also, like all of the conversations that we've had with each of our guests, there's been such an honesty that, like you're saying about having your appointment with your psychiatrist, I think maybe 5 years ago, we wouldn't be so open. And I think that can only serve all of us. And again, with the younger generations coming up, to know that it is okay. We're not supposed to be this perfect, but we are supposed to feel. And
if you ask me, maybe I don't know, but you're braver if you're in therapy. So I really hope that our kids, you'll be the odd one out if you're not in therapy in 20 or 25 years. Because usually when you're in therapy in 2024, you are in therapy mostly because your family isn't. So you have to handle all these interpersonal tensions with a bit of distance. Am I right? Yeah. No, but I'm really hoping my kids. I'm telling them that a doctor for your head, that's how I call it, or a doctor for your mind or for your emotions, is the most important. It's the most important bit.
It is, because it controls all of us. I mean, so when we're looking at dealing with our mothers postnatally, do you find postnatally, of course now they are a very different person, they have this little being, and do you find that there is a much bigger bandwidth of who they are now to who they were before? Do you find that in your experience that if you've worked with them antenatally and then postnatally?
Yes, but I find that the best window of opportunity is almost before, because they're still sleeping, because they haven't been shocked yet into that first child. I mean, even if everything goes well and there's no birth injuries, it's just always a shock, right? So you can choose. I see some open up to the bigger bandwidth to who they truly are. And I also see others retreat into all the roles, like the maiden roles. I want to stay super attractive. I want to be back to, you have these two narratives. You have the women who become super empowered and step into a more adult version of themselves. And then you have those who are not ready, because it's a big change, and and they want to remain their maiden selves. Do I make sense? Yeah?
I do. Because when we do have a baby, it brings out something in most of us that we never knew existed, and it is education and preparation. So antenatally, if we can find some vehicle that consistently enables our families to really, our mothers to get that support and to create this support system for them. And I find it's very hard because there's all these groups going on, and yet none of us really seem to be talking to one another. We had Carina, who was talking about identity and an identity coach, and Carina, who's a physiotherapist, she had no idea this existed, and yet so valuable in how it's going to help us be so much more content within ourselves. So how do we do that?
Well, I think if you care about, I think the reason my classes are full is not just because I'm good at my technique, I mean, that's part of it, but it's also I offer these bridges, and I think all of us, what you're doing, trying to create centers for mums where it's just so important not to be territorial, and sadly in Dubai, that's something I see a lot in the medical field or in the fitness industry, and I don't think you ever have anything to gain from not sending your clients out to a professional who's doing something you're not doing anyway. So I think that's part of, people also pay for you to direct them to other places. And if you take apart even without money, I would do this any day, if people come to me and ask me, who do you see for this? I'm like, generally, I've tried this person. I think they're the most skilled and kind. These are the two most important things for me. They have to be kind, compassionate, and skilled. If you have both, you're on my list.
So again, there's so many common threads that have run through every single conversation. One of them being kindness, because that's what's going to enable us to move beyond whatever it is that we have. And if we're looking at the main focus of today, which is about mental health and women's mental health and those hormones, moving in now into later years. So is it just postnatal that you work with, or do you find working with a woman, say, who's gone through menopause or is going through menopause, is that very different, or does that give different challenges?
It is different in the sense that I see a lot of mourning in my menopausal women because they didn't have the opportunities that my generation has to be in touch with the cycles, or we're just beginning to do it, but I do feel like my mom's generation, for instance, they didn't talk about it, they didn't acknowledge it, they didn't talk about the period, they didn't talk about pregnancy, it was just like go, go, go. And I feel very privileged that we're at that time when I'm teaching boys. I only have boys. I don't know why I only make boys, but maybe it's just to teach them not to be so afraid of women's cyclical ways.
Very important.
Yes.
So, if we're looking again, just going back to the menopause, and we know it has a different impact on the biochemistry, on the core strengthening and building body mass. If somebody was hesitant and thinking it isn't going to make a difference, how would you encourage them? What advice would you give them?
The diaper conversation. Sorry.
Yeah, I've had that.
But even when they're 30, I'm like, there's a movement in Pilates called footwork, when you're on the machine and you're pressing in and out, and they keep pushing with their back, and for some reason people still instruct that. And I'm like, do you want to wear diapers soon? Because that's the best way to go. And so I think that unfolds, two of the main reasons why people end up in nursing homes are because they're incontinent or they tripped. So I just think that's the way to go. And I also share the fact that I do not I abhor weightlifting, but I do it because it's just like taking a shower in the morning. You have to do it to be clean, and not to be clean, but just to be the best version of yourself and the healthiest version of yourself.
So my take from that is about finding your journey and what suits you, but it has to be found, because otherwise we are doing a disservice to ourselves and our responsibility to ourselves.
Do you know, I don't know if you've read this book from Dr. Peter Attia, Outlive. It's great, huh? Sadly, it's again a man. I cannot wait to write a book on biohacking for women. But he kind of says, at 90, what do you want to be able to do? So what's your goal? You want to be able to lift your suitcase when you're traveling. You want to be able to walk through that airport to go and see your grandkids, for instance. What do you want to do? Do you want to be able to carry your grocery? Now backtrack this to today and look at what you're able to do today. And so I took that. I'm working on my farmer's walk because of it. The farmer's walk is you're holding when you're 40, you're much younger, some people are older. When you're 40 as a woman, you need to be able to carry 70% of your weight now. So for me, that would be about 40 kilos. To be able, when I'm 90, to walk for 2.5 kilometers with my grocery. That's huge because of muscle mass. So that's how I motivate people. I'm like, okay, long run, where do you want to be? What do you want to be able to do?
So this is something so simple. Simple in that this is what we have to do. It's not a long list, but it's just highlighting what it can have an impact in terms of the amount of weight and where it will lead us. It's just one sentence, if you like, because we can get absolutely bogged down in, we should be taking this supplement, we should be eating this food, we should be doing this, but actually something very simple, that's what you need to do. So we need to find a way to get that information.
Get that information and also accept that not everyone wants to invest that time, and that's okay. I lost my dad at a very young age because of addictions and mental health challenges. So for me, health was always number one, but I appreciate that if you've had a more normal upbringing, maybe you just want to be able to party now, and that's fine, and I'm okay with that. It's just, if the information is out there, I've done my job. You see what I mean?
But again, it's also, like, there's somebody called, his name's just escaped me now. He's a very famous, very famous university lecturer called David Sinclair. There we are. I retrieved it. from my memory. So David Sinclair, he's written a book called Lifespan. And in the book that he talks about, he said that his father, who is 84, he's the star in this book. Now, lifespan is about what we can do, very much about what Lindsey and Russell were talking about. We can live our lives and we can live it to the fullest, or we can live our lives and end up in a wheelchair in some nursing home. And we have the opportunity to make these choices. But he talked about how he's now 84, he has such a sense of purpose, which is he's opened a new business at 82, opened a new business, but he said he's now going to the gym and he's stronger and fitter than than David Sinclair. David Sinclair at the minute is 54. He said, my 84-year-old father is fitter than me. Now, he was never into core strength or exercising, but he really understood the value of building his muscle because he wanted to be around to see his grandchildren.
Now, for women, it's slightly different because of childbirth and because of menopause and how these muscles can... Have you heard of prolapses? You know, when the organs can shift out of alignment and sometimes drop down, and that creates a lack of...
Joys of being a woman.
Yeah, the joys of birthing children. But it's that changes things in terms of how we want to... That's why core strength is even more important for us, because we do need to hold these organs in place and avoid too much tension and too much looseness, and ultimately be our healthiest. And the reason, you know, you hear a lot of moms who can't go on trampoline or who can't carry their children because it's too heavy, right? So I think for us, the muscle strengthening and the core strength, I mean, the core strengthening specifically, are probably even more important than for men.
And when we're looking at our core strength and when we are, you know, going into pregnancy, if you like, it's even before then, isn't it? So it's about having that overall education about the importance of diet, the importance of sleep, because all of it comes together in order for that core strength to be built.
Physiologically, yes, when you sleep better, you feel better. I'm an insomniac, so I would know. But I do think what's most important is not putting pressure on any of these factors, doing your best, but also living a little and just being fluid with what comes your way. You know, like, I do my best, I enjoy, I secure some elements into my life, I've got my routine, and then the rest of the time, come what may.
And routine of all of it is also really, really important. We work very hard at really creating a routine for our children. And we are so focused on that, but actually we need the routine just as much around our sleep, around our health, around what we are eating as well, and around the movement, very much about movement, but finding, you know, what it is that enables you to give that movement.
Yeah, I do find people focus too much on going to classes. So I know my business model depends on it, but still, I'm going to tell you the truth. You just need to move. I don't do cardio. I don't have time anymore. But I do go after my kids, and we go for long walks on the weekend. And I also think it's very hard to tell your children to do something you're not doing yourself. So I had this client, very sedentary life, and a lot of helpers in the family, and she was like, oh, they don't, how do you do this? Your kids love to be on the balance bike. And I was like, because I love to go on a walk. And I'm sure, sorry, but you're probably going to have climbers in your family or super athletes because they see you do it. And it's going to be challenging, but it's so much better than having kids at home on their screens.
Yeah. I agree. So just my final question. What piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
It's the one I'm trying to give myself now. Will it matter in 2 years? You know, not to overthink, I'm a chronic, anxious, overthinker, worrier. I said that, I'm a people pleaser, so I want to make sure that, did I say this right? Did I upset her? And I think it's nice to be in tune with other people's feelings, but sometimes doing, you know what he said earlier, Russell? He said, it's just, you're always holding back. We always want to be small because we think it keeps us safe. And to some extent it does, but then we're not living. So.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And again, the common thread is about not holding back and just accepting of us. So thank you so much. And I
thank you, Julie. Thank you everyone for staying. It's late.
I'm so excited to meet with you and talk with you. So I know it's late and I'm really, really sorry. So I would love you to give what exactly
What is good? What is
but
happening?
who you are as well, because we're talking very much about women and our mental health, but who you are.
Sure. Hi everyone, my name is Iryna. Very excited to be here and share a little bit of my story. So I think I'm probably gonna go back and start where it's all started, which is Singapore. I used to live there, and I used to be a general manager of Google Food, running all of the food operations for the Singapore site. So feeding 2,500 people a day, twice a day, producing lots of food, managing big operation. And during that time, I started realizing how much food waste we are producing, how much single-use plastic waste we are producing. So my team and I, we pivoted lots of different projects that helped us to reduce the food waste, reduce the plastics. Then I started looking into, what am I doing at home? Every time you open your garbage bin and you see all this trash. And I really started looking into, what does sustainability mean? What can I do as a person? And then as you kind of start this personal journey, you realize that, actually what we eat has a lot to do with that as well. So I start looking into different ingredients. I start looking into, labels and reading labels, trying to understand that. And then I found out that I was pregnant. So once our son was born, I think, we only have one at the moment, you have that extra pressure that just kind of rolls in the second the baby arrives. Number one, how do I make sure the baby's alive? How do I keep my baby alive? How do I make sure that my baby is the healthiest baby? What is healthy baby? What is a healthy food? And there is social media, there is friends, there is family, there is everyone else who has an opinion. We spoke a lot about it today. And you just feel all that pressure, and I'm not even talking what are you feeling internally just by delivering, a human and bringing another life to this planet. It's a lot of pressure. How do you cope? What do you do? And my coping mechanism was to really ignore everyone, do your research. So
that takes a certain strength of character to
Yeah.
ignore everyone. And how were you able to do that? What was your driver?
Do you know what? I think one of the biggest drivers is actually going back to my childhood. And my dad, he's very strong personality in a good way. One of the things he said to me from a very young age is, always remember, public's opinion is opinion of people who hasn't been asked to give one. And that's, and that's kind of like his
Very
way of
powerful.
life. So, but you have, on one side, you have a strong dad, and then you have the public and the teachers and the school who kind of try to steer you away different ways. So it's also, it's interesting how it's very hard to get it right. It's like whether you go one way or the other, there will be certain complexities you will deal along the way. And it's really, about your personal journey and how you're going to find your own pathway, right? And how you're going to cope
I
with
also
things.
think that it isn't, do you go to right or do you go to the left? I think you find your way, which generally will take you down the pathway that you need.
So for your journey, for sure. But for me, coming back to sort of ingredients, when I started looking into different products that are available for kids, and things like yogurt, cereal, and my perception was, if it's a good brand, it's good, and they put it in nice packaging, make it look very wholesome, and then you flip it and you read. The sort of red flag number one, if I can't pronounce the name of the ingredient, probably it's not that good for me, or if I not even remotely closely understand what it is. And then the amount of the ingredients in a product, when it takes a paragraph, I always question, what is it? And then, it goes into my favorite one, sugar, the hidden sugar. Like, you can buy a pot of little baby yogurt that is branded as great and healthy for kids. There is more sugar in it than a can of Coke. That thing is 100 grams. Coke is 330 mils,
So I had two instances last week, and one of them was, we were talking about this little boy, and he was very low down on the centile chart. He was less than 25% on the centile chart. And so we were talking about his diet and his sleep, of course. And then, Mummy was saying that he has this really healthy millet cereal. And, that in itself, it's not a grain, so that's it's not a wheat, so that's really good. So I said, okay, let's just have a look at what the ingredients are. So on the packaging, it's clearly a very expensive product. On the packaging, great big writing was no refined sugar. And so we looked. In every portion of food that this little boy was having, and he had 2 at every setting, there was 25 grams of sugar. So he was having 50 grams of sugar every single morning, and then sometimes in the evening, if he wanted that to fill himself up. And it's so hard for parents. Yeah. If I looked at the ingredients, if you looked at the packaging, you would think this is one of the best and safest products. I'm really giving good food to my children. So there was that example. I then sat down with another family a day later, and we looked at these pouches that families are having. I know they're my bugbear too. And within one small pouch, there was 12 grams of salt. Yeah. Now, this was a 6-month-old baby that was having this, and we know up until the age of 1 that children are not to have salt because of the impact on these tiny little kidneys. And we know that these kidneys have to work for a very, very long time. So if we are putting them under stress at 6 months, then the result is cardiac disease.
But also when the little body, sorry to jump in, when the little body had to spend so much time trying to undo the damage that that is happening, how do they have the energy to focus on the growth and the right building blocks that they need to succeed in that growth? So with ingredients, it's also understanding where it comes from. It's like yogurt is an example, cereal, but also toothpaste. Toothpaste, when I started geeking out and reading about toothpaste, ingredients of the toothpaste, kind of was thinking, oh God, like, what do I do? Do I not brush teeth? Like, what is actually better for me? But then, of course, out there is products that are better, that don't use all this nasty sugars.
But talking about toothpaste and the plastics that are in the toothpaste, there was a study, and they're coming through again and again, that in the placenta, so what our baby in uterus is absorbing, there is plastics been found in the placenta. This is how prevalent. So like you say, right from the very beginning, our babies being born and exposed to the plastics. And then with the toothpaste, so it is about looking and educating and getting toothpaste that doesn't contain these harmful.
And that's for me, as I start doing this research, and pretty much these days, you would look, about microplastics, fish, love fish, where does it come from? Can we trace back where does it come from? Or even sustainable farming, like what is exactly they're doing? Unless you kind of see it yourself and trust the person, you don't really know, right? And you don't know exactly what you're consuming. So as I was doing all of my research and kind of finding all these different things that was shocking me, I really had that need, and it was during my conversation with Universe. I just need to find a source of truth and a brand that I can trust. And your mom, full-time job, big job. There's a lot of stress, right? I don't want to be stressed about food. I just need to be able to purchase things from one place. And then, lucky for me, I think Universe heard me. Scoop Whole Foods brand came in from Australia. It's a brand that originated in Australia. Basically specializing in sustainable retail of bulk, whole foods, and eco-friendly products. So they arrived to Singapore. I was interested in what they had to offer. And the thing that I love about the brand is that the majority of product comes from Australia, where organics laws are very strict, farming laws are very strict. So the produce and the soil is so good that they naturally grow really good produce. I loved how brand was very ethical and also very open about where the produce came from. Who are the farmers that they're working with, and every single ingredient has a personal story of connection, which I really could connect to the customer. And then the other thing I loved about store is that all of the produce was sold in bulk. So I had the opportunity to come and buy, with my own container. I could buy as little as I wanted, or as much as I wanted, and you're not tied into half a kilo of an ingredient that you might not ever use again. So, and I became a very loyal customer of Scoop Whole Foods. And then,
So, just going back to the actual brand itself, because it is yet to arrive here in Dubai.
That's right.
And so you go along to the store with your container,
That's
and
right.
then you can choose how much you'd like to buy.
Exactly. So all of the product is basically bulk produce. So all of it presented. Think of your nuts, seeds, pulses, tea. So like a dry pantry items. They're all presented in bulk, so you can refill your container, or you can get a container from us. And yeah, exactly.
So have you experienced any challenges rather, coming into Dubai, so bringing the product into Dubai?
We have a very good supply chain in Australia, which is great because the regional Australian team, they're very much supporting us on this journey as well. So that's quite straightforward. You just go through a registration process with the Dubai municipality, and of course you need to make sure you've got your paperwork in place, and that's straightforward. I think one of the key challenges was finding a space. So we've now settled on the spring souk. So that's going to be the first store location.
Okay, congratulations. That's really... So with those, what are some of the things that you would think we really need to buy from Scoop? What are some of the products?
I think, well, considering that I'm bringing Scoop Whole Foods here, I think you should buy all of the products. Just joking. No, look, for me, it's as a customer back in the day, and I'm kind of looking at myself now as a customer, right, in the customer's shoes. One of the key things that I was very excited about is wholesome product, whether it's nuts or seeds or flours, grains, that I knew where they were coming from and I knew it was a good quality. The other part is, of course, all of the kids' snacks, kids-friendly snacks. There's lots of different cereals.